without further ado, we're going to kick off the 2020 data visualization presentations.
Okay, so let's introduce our first group focused on data and policy. Marisa is going to talk about the unequal impacts of gun violence and the search for peace in America's cities.
Robin visualizes maritime claims submitted to the United Nations.
And Mio analyzes sexual misconduct, harassment, and discrimination in STEM academia.
Saloni shows the impact of carbon cap and trade markets.
And Michael presents a visual interface to understand accounting statements filed with the SEC. So Marisa, please take it away.
From mass shootings in Parkland and El Paso to police shootings of Tamir Rice and Michael Brown, or even from the horrific footage of the killing of Ahmaud Arbery that surfaced this past week, I'd imagine that the topic of American gun violence is familiar to many of you. But today I want to break down a different story of this crisis, about the victims and about the survivors of gun violence that often go overlooked. In 2018, nearly 40,000 people were killed by a gun in the US. That's enough to fill Citi Field Baseball Stadium in Queens, New York. But to fully understand this crisis, we need to look at rates, or deaths per 100,000 people. The biggest inequities become visible when we look at the gun death rates by race, age, and ethnicity. We can see that the gun homicide rate for young Black Americans is significantly higher than the death rate of any other group for both homicide or suicide. But while the gun suicide crisis is considered a public health crisis, gun homicide is considered a crisis of criminality. Now, some might ask why addressing gun violence only through law enforcement and the criminal justice system is an issue. So let's talk a little bit about why. The US has the highest incarceration rate in the world. It's 6 times the rate of Canada and 15 times the rate of Japan. And while young Black men are most likely to be the victims of gun homicide in the US, they're also most likely to be incarcerated. They're most likely to be arrested for weapons possession, despite research showing that gun ownership is actually higher amongst white Americans. I think it's really important for us to note that the statistics we've looked at have historically been used to support heavier policing in communities of color, as well as racist policies such as stop and frisk. But I think this same data can instead be used to push back on systems of oppression. On average, the perpetrators of gun violence actually represent less than 1% of residents in cities across the US. These individuals are often connected and caught in cycles of retaliatory violence. And in response to this, a lot of cities have adopted local strategies that aim to humanize rather than criminalize those at the center. By framing these individuals as assets to their communities, they're able to promote peace and accountability without further contributing to systems of mass incarceration and racial inequity in the US. If we're serious about ending America's gun violence crisis, efforts like these need to be part of a larger set of integrated gun violence reduction strategies, including policy-level gun reform. Now, we've seen recent movements, including March for Our Lives and Black Lives Matter, doing really critical and groundbreaking work to bring mass shootings and police shootings to the forefront of media and policy discussions. But again, together, these acts of violence still contribute just a small fraction of annual gun deaths. So my question is, what will it take for us to elevate daily gun violence into this national discourse? And how do we reckon with a gun violence crisis that disproportionately kills and criminalizes Black and Brown youth? Thank you so much.
This project visualizes maritime claims and related diplomatic processes. Unlike the landmass divided by many borders into different states, most of our maps and mental images represent the sea free of any delimitations. This, however, does not depict reality. As well as the landmass, also the sea is divided into different territories. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea defines 3 zones: Most relevant for this project is the 200 nautical miles big exclusive economic zone. Within this zone, states have the exclusive right to exploit all living and dead resources. Article 76 of the Convention of the Law of the Sea gives states the rights to claim exclusive economic territory even beyond these 200 nautical miles. Two different entrances allow deeper insights. One contextualizes the legal framework related to the claims. The other visualizes scenarios which shows what happens if all claims are adopted. This map reveals all borders in the sea. Since the Law of the Sea is a very young legal framework, just entered into force in 1994, a lot of delimitations are still disputed. Most importantly, though, it shows the huge dimensions of the exclusive economic zone, as well as how these areas are even increased by the claims. Let's have a closer look on these dimensions. These circles encode the area sizes of all claims. The left side shows claims from states of the global north. France, for example, claims an area of 4 million square kilometers. On the right side, we see many claims from states of the global south, but much smaller in their size, except for South Africa with 4 million square kilometers. How comes that claims of some states of the global north contain such huge areas? One reason is that they still profit from former colonized territories. These circles now encode the total economic exploitable area of France. On the left, related to the mainland of France. On the right, related to the overseas territories of France. It shows that France profits from the overseas territory with almost 10 million square kilometers. If all claims of France are adopted, this number will increase up to 14 million square kilometers. Same, only in smaller dimensions, is valid for Great Britain. Now, before coming to the final dashboard tool, let's have a brief look on the legal framework and diplomatic process surrounding these claims. This slide shows the total 200 pages of the Convention on the Law of the Sea. The blue color highlights policies in regards to economic purposes, while those in green policies in regards of environmental protection. It clearly shows that the economic exploitation of the ocean is hardwired into the convention. When a claim is submitted to the UN, other member states react to this claim. This network takes Japan's claim as a case study and shows claim-related diplomatic reactions on a micro level. Also, the macro level allows interesting insights. There is indeed a cluster of reactions among the global north states, colored in green, but there are also diplomatic notes sent out to claims of states of the global south, colored in pink. Finally, a dashboard tool allows navigating through all claims and related diplomatic reactions. Thank you.
Since the advent of the Me Too movement in 2017, women have seized the opportunity to raise their voices all over the world, highlighting the extent of sexual misconduct, harassment, and discrimination in society. It finally exposed the magnitude, breadth, and uniformity of the female experience of sexual misconduct, and ushered in a certain perspective shift in the conversation surrounding these matters. But why is sexual misconduct such a problem in the first place? Turns out people have wildly different views on what consent is. Have you ever thought that maybe what you're okay with is not the same as what your friend or partner is okay with? Have you ever thought about how to make sure you're both comfortable? In a Planned Parenthood survey researching US adults' understanding of sexual consent and assault, only 35% of men had a problem with the statement, mixed signals could mean consent. And only 13% of men disagreed that sexual assault accusations are often used by women as a way for them to get back at men. Significant problems arise on a macro scale level when these misinformed views are held by those who enforce law and order. Problems are magnified in environments where men dominate, like STEM. Women in STEM experience the highest rate of sexual harassment of any profession outside of the military. So how severe is the problem? There are 1,030 publicly reported cases of sexual misconduct in academia from 1979 to 2020. Cases of misconduct are likely much higher than what is officially reported. There are several events that cause more public reporting. First, in 1980, when Title IX, a law prohibiting sex discrimination in educational institutions receiving federal funding, was used for the first time to establish that sex harassment was discrimination. In 1991, Anita Hill testified against then Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas on accounts of sexual harassment while he was her supervisor. And finally, the Me Too movement triggered an explosion of reports after 2017. Out of these cases, 332 of them are from STEM fields. Let's look at what happens to those who are accused in STEM. Only 20% of the cases result in perpetrators getting fired. Another 20% are given the opportunity to resign. If you look closer at the outcomes, we see that most cases result in pretty casual consequences. Aside from being allowed to resign gracefully, some are suspended for a few years and then invited to come back. Some get by with just a warning. Some institutions settle with accusers on behalf of the perpetrators. Cases of misconduct are most common in bioscience, psychology, and math. Remember these guys? They are all perpetrators of sexual misconduct. When we look at the timeline of major events that led to disciplinary action, we can see that many of them have long careers before there is any outcome in their cases. Bars on the left show the number of years between the first known incident and first complaint filed. Bars on the right side show the number of years between the first complaint and the outcome of an investigation. Historically, the Office of Civil Rights has said that a typical Title IX investigation should only take 60 to 90 days. Many of these cases have lasted decades. Especially if the perpetrators are influential scientists, institutions are reluctant to act on complaints. Inder Verma, for example, a prominent cancer biologist, had 42 years of free range before he resigned in 2018. So we've established that STEM academia is a harsh environment for women that has deep systemic flaws. But women have persevered in these circumstances with successful careers and will keep doing so. Case in point, all of these names are of women who have published papers in scientific fields. And progress has been made in the past year thanks to the people who have tirelessly fought for women in STEM. For example, the National Academy of Sciences finally voted to allow membership to be revoked from harassers. But there's still so much more work to do. Let's take steps to keep empowering and mentoring women both in STEM and beyond. Thank you.
This project asks a simple question. Are forests money or mitigation? We all know what money is, but what is mitigation? It refers to reducing or preventing greenhouse gas emissions either by reducing it at sources, such as burning of fossil fuels, or by enhancing the sinks that accumulate these gases, such as oceans and forests. Forests are our best bet in achieving climate change mitigation. They're constantly at high risk due to global demand for land and resources. Policies are being discussed and implemented to save these forests. These policies are very important as their implementation in present could significantly affect our future. Saving them became essential. Hence, 3 organizations from United Nations adopted a program known as UN RED. The program basically aims to reduce deforestation and prevent greenhouse gas emissions by remunerating the landowner. As the policy remunerates the landowner, forest land suddenly became a commodity of business, which led to massive land grabs. Looking at this map, we could understand the scale of land grabs. Most of the land grabs were driven by farming and livestock, with 46% due to agriculture alone. But why agriculture? The definitions of forests are pretty lenient and consider industrial farms and agriculture as forests. This resulted in increased deforestation. As we can see, deforestation has exponentially increased from implementation year of 2008, reaching its peak in 2016, apparently the same year when REDD+ was the most transacted project type in voluntary carbon markets. Under this policy, the value of forest depends directly on its carbon storing capacity. It justifies sacrificing a forest instead of monoculture farm merely based on its carbon accumulation capacity. There's a similar trend when we look at emissions associated from deforestation as well. Policies such as REDD+ are a growing concern as they could be used to offset emissions under carbon markets. The world is just beginning to commodify complex natural systems into linear capitalist programs. The idea of privatizing natural resource by putting an economic value is a false solution. The consequences have been disastrous, leading to increased emissions, deforestation, resource grabs, and human rights violations. For instance, a study found that REDD+ projects created local and social conflicts in 92% of all cases studied. Should we trade forest in an economic market? I want to conclude my piece saying no. Forests are mitigation and not money.
I used to be a financial analyst. I spent most of my time studying tables and reading commentaries in very long legal documents like the one you're seeing right now. All public companies have these documents filed with the US Securities and Exchange Commission every quarter. Warren Buffett said reading these documents consistently and en masse were the keys to his success as an investor. I often wish that there was a faster way to get through all of this tedious reading. There are thousands upon thousands of public companies in the United States alone, each with many hundreds of these documents. Reading through all of these documents for one company is a monumental job. Reading through them for many hardly seems possible. Furthermore, you need specialized training in accounting and need to know something about where to go within the documents to find key pieces of information. Solving this problem is what my thesis project, Visual Value, is all about. Using financial data that I scraped from these document filings, I created a tool that allows financial analysts to explore several years' worth of financial performance information for 5 companies: Google, Facebook, Tesla, Netflix, and Cheniere Energy. Since the income statement of a company represents inflows and outflows of money and capital for a specific period of time, I focused the design of this information on what you are currently seeing, called a waterfall chart, which translates the tabular income statement found within the document filings to a visual output that allows users to see the performance of each company, saving them a fair bit of time and effort. Each year's waterfall chart will look slightly different since no 2 years of performance are exactly the same. The company being displayed in the tool right now, Cheniere Energy, was one I used to follow, and as you can see, in the present day is quite profitable and doing well, but 5 years ago was massively unprofitable. Each year has its own unique shape based on the performance. The same is true of Tesla, although they haven't turned that profitability corner yet. As you can see, Tesla has always been operating at a loss, but Elon Musk has managed to narrow it down over the years. So what about details? Analysts want to be able to look at this and see not just the overarching story of performance, but be able to peel back the layers on these categories and discover insights like, how much is Solar City, the energy storage and generation part of Tesla's business, contributing to Tesla's revenues in 2019? Looks like it's not much, only 6% in 2019. Or how does Cheniere Energy's operating profit look in comparison to where it started in 2015? Looks like it's growing like a weed. You can put all the numbers for a company's performance into context in this way. And what if I didn't know anything about the company at all? Parts of the documents include descriptions of the business that I added as an optional feature. As the business changes from year to year, the description will update and change. And what if I still wanted to see a table? Well, I included that too, since old habits die hard, especially in the financial industry. The great thing is that you don't need to be an accountant necessarily to understand what these visual elements represent. And for experienced practitioners, one glance will allow them to get the full picture of a company's annual performance without needing to sit down and read the docs. Financial analysts and investors look for value in all types of companies, but this tool will allow them to see this value visually.
That was awesome. What a diverse range of projects to kick this off with. We're going to move on to our next theme of the evening, which is health and livelihood. We're going to start health and livelihood with Dan, who shows us the growth and livability of the megacity Shenzhen.
Amanda explores the relationship between the climate crisis and sleep health.
Yiran analyzes how global wildlife training is related to infectious diseases.
And Nour is mapping New York City's green roof potential.
And Zui uncovers global attitudes towards masks. Very relevant. But let's start with Dan. You're up.
Hello, everyone. This is a project about the growth and livability of Shenzhen, a young megacity in China. 70% of the world population will reside in cities by 2050. Urbanization is one of the most significant trends. China's global rise has outgrown everyone's expectations. Shenzhen, a 40-year-old young city, has third highest GDP in mainland China. It is the best example of urbanization in developing countries. Located in south coast of China, neighboring Hong Kong, by looking at Shenzhen, we could learn about the challenges that come with rapid growth and learn to build our city better. Let's travel back to 4 decades ago. Shenzhen was a small fish town with 300,000 populations. Yeah, with this 1979 satellite image, we could barely see any human infrastructure on the land of Shenzhen. This year, Shenzhen became the first special economic zone in China, practice the capitalist market economy under the communist government. In these satellite images, you can see how much Shenzhen has changed. By 2018, Shenzhen's GDP has exceeded its neighbor Hong Kong. Today, Shenzhen has the highest GDP per capita in the nation. It is the most densely populated urban region in China, with over 20 million temporary and permanent populations. It is the epitome of the world factory of China, with the third busiest container port in the world. Many consumer electronics, like your iPhone, are produced in Shenzhen. Also, with the name of China's Silicon Valley, it is the birthplace and headquarters of many Chinese top technology companies, like Tencent, Huawei, and DJI. This is a story of growth, but rapid growth comes with challenges. The green infrastructure plays a vital role in city's livability and sustainability. The urban green space development in Shenzhen is foresight. The green coverage rate has maintained 45%, as it is a new city benefiting from the top-down urban divide. However, per capita green area rate has been going down in recent years, which is less than ideal. We can take a look at the map to see the land use of grass, forests, and parks, and find out where other areas could be improved. Regarding hospital accessibility, Shenzhen is under a very insufficient situation. There are only 2.7 doctors per 1,000 populations, while other megacities in China, like Beijing and Shanghai, have 5. Same situation for the hospital beds, way below the national average. On the map, it is a visualization of 10 minutes driving reachable regions around all Shenzhen major hospitals. 10 minutes could mean a lot to people who have urgent medical needs by checking emergency service here. We can see many areas are less convenient to access urgent care. In terms of crime and safety, there's a lack of transparency at the city level. Luckily, the police crime statistic of Luohu district is available. There are many interesting information you can explore here. Overall, Luohu's crime and public safety have improved a lot, but its crime rate still much higher than its neighbor Hong Kong. The map shows the 5 minutes driving reachable regions around all the police stations in Shenzhen. By adding education as a point of interest, we could find out for all the schools in this area of Nanzhen district, it will take longer for the police to arrive after an emergency call. There are a lot more you can explore with this application. Shenzhen's growth is undeniable, but under the beautiful skyscrapers and the city lights, it's people who live in it. We shall not overlook the importance of the livability, but prioritize it in a city's sustainable development. No matter where you live, I hope you can find something valuable and useful to you and your city. Thank you.
Climate and Sleep explores how poor air quality and rising temperatures threaten one of our most fundamental human needs, sleep. Think to yourself, how many hours of sleep do I get each night? Is it more than the recommended amount for adults of at least 7 hours? Is it less than that? More than 1/3 of Americans report insufficient sleep. And this difference can have a substantial impact on your overall health. Sleeping more than 7 hours can greatly reduce your likelihood of experiencing numerous risk factors and chronic health conditions. Sleep loss is a recognized public health epidemic. 9 out of 10 people worldwide regularly breathe polluted air. More than 100 million people in the United States reside where air pollution exceeds health-based air quality standards. Observing maximum and median air quality index levels from annual reports between 1980 and 2019, we can see that overall maximum values have lowered and median values have leveled out at the top range of what is considered good. This progress is due in large part to the 1970 Clean Air Act regulating air emissions. Nearly 25 million Americans have asthma. When you are asleep, you breathe less often, less deeply, and absorb less oxygen. High ozone and particulate matter levels are especially harmful to those suffering from respiratory issues like asthma, where symptoms are typically worse during the early morning. The highest overall rates of insufficient sleep are in the southeast region of the US, while the lowest overall levels are in the Midwest. Rates of asthma can vary across the country, but are also lowest in the Midwest region. Higher carbon dioxide levels and warmer temperatures extend the allergen season and increase pollen production. Those with asthma and allergies are impacted by the increase in pollen production in plants like ragweed. Across North America, the length of the ragweed allergen season has increased drastically over a recorded 20-year period, impacting the growing season of northern climates more significantly. Body temperature and ambient temperature both considerably impact sleep patterns. Rising temperatures is a main factor that affects sleep quality. Your body clock, or circadian rhythm, controls the normal sleep-wake cycle, and regulating your temperature is a main component helping you fall asleep and remain asleep. As your body's core cools, the temperature drop produces sleep onset. For those without air conditioners to maintain a consistent ambient temperature, sleeping through hot months can become very challenging. Many states in the Southwest and Southeast already experience a high quantity of nights with lows above 75 degrees Fahrenheit. As global heating continues, these areas will endure more of these hot nights, causing difficulty sleeping. Some of these areas also have high populations of people vulnerable to high heat. For example, Florida's population is made up of approximately 20% seniors, and nearly 20% of Louisiana's population lives in poverty. There are a number of studies exploring the relationship between the climate crisis and sleep health. However, it is a relatively new focus, and increased research is needed in this area. Today, we are beginning to see nature rebound as we're staying at home. Let's move forward in protecting our planet and protecting our sleep. Thank you.
COVID-19 has caused a worldwide epidemic, and the origin of the outbreak is believed to have been in a wildlife market in Wuhan, China, which sold live and dead wildlife for human consumption. The exact origin of COVID-19 are still unknown, but it is suspected to have originated in bats and may have jumped to human via an intermediary wildlife animal species. This outbreak brought the term zoonotic disease to the public. Zoonotic diseases are illnesses caused by germs that are passed between animals and humans with non-human animal origin. Epidemic caused by zoonotic disease has a long history and are much more common than people may realize. Within hundreds of emerging infectious diseases, aka EIDs, reported since 1940, more than 60% of EID events are caused by zoonotic pathogens. During 2018 to 2019, a total of more than 63 mammals and 125 genera were treated in the form of live animals. 66 genera involved in treatings could be potential reservoirs of 17 zoonotic diseases. Given the 17 zoonotic diseases, rabies virus has the most indirect and direct wildlife reservoir. Here, direct means the zoonotic disease is identified in the genus, the term you might have heard in high school biology class for classifying organisms, while indirect means it is identified in different genus within the same taxonomic family, the higher rank of genus. Among all mammals treated as live during 2018 to 2019, almost every species is a potential reservoir of any zoonotic disease stated above. Within more than 63 species reported by import countries, more than 62,000 species could potentially carry zoonotic disease. Rabies virus, yellow fever virus, H5N1 were identified in the most species treated. Based on the 17 zoonotic diseases and their potential reservoirs provided above, I assessed the risk score of each genus by +1 for being indirect reservoir and +2 for being direct reservoirs. As a result, the top 6 risky wildlife mammals treated are chimpanzee, orangutan, canine, cat, fox, and monkey. Fortunately, the top 5 risky wildlife mammals were not largely treated, but monkey, as a 6th risky mammal, has a tremendous trading amount. Around 46,000 species were exported and more than 50,000 species were imported. Wildlife trading is risky in transmitting zoonotic diseases, but why people still purchase them? Actually, sustainable, legal, and equitable wildlife trade could enhance rural livelihoods and conserve biological diversity. However, a tremendous amount of tradings are promoted by personal demands under illegal tradings. Wildlife such as rhinos and pangolins are traded countries where people believe they have no proven medicinal value on helping illness. In fact, pangolin scales and rhino horns that people believe are beneficial to health are made of keratin, which is the same material that makes up human fingernail and hair. Another factor that triggers wildlife consumption is people's desire of wealth symbols. Illegal tradings are even more dangerous because of the lack of disease testing. In the pandemic of COVID-19, practicing social distance is probably the only thing we can do. But to prevent the outbreak of next zoonotic disease pandemic, there are a lot of things we can do, but ensuring not facilitating wildlife trade, especially that are illegal. Thank you.
A green roof is a rooftop covered with plants, either partially or completely. This is the largest green roof in New York City, spanning almost 300,000 square footage, located on top of the Jacob Javits Convention Center in the middle of Manhattan. This rooftop, like most in New York, was completely barren and concrete only a few years ago. It was trapping heat and increasing energy consumption and expenses for the building. Since the green roof was installed, though, not only has it decreased energy usage by 26%, saving over $3 million a year, it retains 77% of storm water that's an issue in the city and has increased biodiversity in the area. So as we can see, green roofs' benefits are immense. They're environmental, they're social, and they're economical. But as of right now, only 0.1% of the rooftops in New York City's 1 million buildings have green roofs. There is room to grow. Teaming up with the Nature Conservancy and the Urban Systems Lab, I set out to transform the extensive research they've done on green roofs into a tool that the city can use to visualize their future green roof potential. The goal is to inform and empower citizens about this great opportunity located on their rooftops. You can start off by learning about the green roof potential in each borough and compare it to the entire city or map region that you're looking at. We quickly notice that Bronx and Manhattan have the highest potential, meaning they have the highest percentage of suitable rooftops for green roofs. You can also explore the potential of a specific region that you're interested in, and not just an entire borough. So for example, if I'm an NGO interested in combating the Newtown Creek's water pollution problem, using the address, you can quickly find the neighborhood that you're looking for. And explore the potential rooftops in that neighborhood. This neighborhood has around 42% potential. If we want to know what the environmental benefits that would be, that's a 42% habitat increase, which is a total area of 1.8 million square footage. So maybe instead of a specific location, you're interested in a specific type of building. Using the map filter, Let's look at all the city-owned buildings and explore their potential. Again, we see Manhattan and Bronx light up with suitable rooftops. Well, let's say I'm a policymaker interested in improving low-income housing units, which tend to be residential city-owned buildings. Now, we can quickly locate all the public housing units with the viable rooftops for green roofs and assess where would be the best place to invest in. If you're new to green roofs and you're curious about the science behind the calculations, you can simply hover on information to learn more. The goal is to bridge the gap between the science behind green roofs and the practical implications of it. Green roofs are the future to sustainable cities, and I hope to facilitate this future. Now I invite you all to check out the site and explore your rooftop's potential. Thank you.
Do you wear a mask when you go out in public? Now you'll probably say yes, but what about a few months ago? Coronavirus has triggered a broad debate worldwide on masks. Through this project, I would like to discuss the global attitudes towards the mask and the rationale behind it. Here's an analysis of the global online news coverage over the past 3 years related to mask. It's clear to see how the focus on mask has tremendously increased over the past few months. If we look at some of the peaks, we can see that the topics around mask change over time. So 2017, 2018, 2019, and now it's all about the mask usage for COVID-19. So the global attitude towards masks are really different between Western countries and the East Asian. One of the most impactful factors is laws and policies. In these years, governments in certain regions passed some legislation on mask prohibitions. The earliest one dated back to 18th century in the United Kingdom. And about a century later, New York passed the first anti-mask law in the United States. Since the late 20th century, 15 countries and regions have ever passed prohibitions against mask wearing in public space. These laws all result from concerns about the public safety because masks can easily disable individual identification. Also, all these anti-mask laws were in Western countries, except the one in Hong Kong last year. And what about the pro-mask policies? During the 2002 SARS and the 2009 H1N1 pandemic, there were only health organization recommendations on wearing masks for specific groups, such as healthcare workers. While during the coronavirus epidemic, so far there have been 98 countries and regions requiring masks in public and 34 recommending masks. Since the start of the pandemic, in East Asia, China has a general recommendation with some local compulsory requirements on masks, resulting in a universal mask usage. Yet in South Korea and Japan, there's no requirement. Mask has also been universally used. In early February, hate crimes against mask-wearing Asians occurred in many Western countries. Mask was at that time racialized and discriminated against. However, about 2 months later, many Western countries started to shift to a pro-mask attitude in such a pandemic time period. Mask culture has spread over East Asia after SARS, mainly in Japan, China, and South Korea, and it becomes a norm for people to wear masks in public on a daily basis. So people wear it for a variety of reasons besides just staying away from disease. For instance, to stay away from pollution or to keep warm. Or as a social firewall to prevent interactions with strangers, or as a fashion statement. However, in the Western world, the mask has still been long stigmatized and associated with diseases or danger. Recently, we can see that COVID-19 is bringing the two closer. The mask culture common in Asia is so new and different to the West that it does trigger conflicts. But as more conversation starts, it will be very helpful to learn about why the difference occurs. And I hope my project can assist with a better understanding of the difference and help us learn from each other. Thank you.
So those were amazing presentations, very timely subjects indeed. And this brings us to the halfway point in our show. We're not going to take an intermission, though. We're going to move on to our next group, our next topic, which is media and society.
Yes, and Neil is asking the question whether Twitter is feeding Bitcoin, specifically how user behavior and Bitcoin market value are correlated.
And then Lulu visualizes American voters' unconscious response to political advertising and media using brain data.
And Janice shows the cultural prejudices and the ecological value of swamps as ecosystems.
And then Brad takes us on an emoji-focused reflection of his experience with COVID-19. But let's start things off with Neil.
Twitter has the ability to have a huge impact on financial markets. Just ask Elon Musk, who on May 1st this year wiped $14 billion off Tesla's stock price in a single 25-character tweet. That might be a one-off for Tesla, but this is a daily occurrence for Bitcoin. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Bitcoin is a digital currency whose value increases and decreases based on how many people buy and sell it. The price variation is extreme, with its value being driven by speculation about its future worth and potential uses. This speculation is not only confined to the closed doors of Wall Street, but also on public social media platforms such as Twitter. This project is an interactive investigation into the nuances of user behavior on Twitter to see which elements can be seen to have the strongest effect on whether we buy or sell Bitcoin. The topic is introduced by taking an in-depth look at every Bitcoin-related tweet over the period of an hour. That's over 1,000 tweets. To begin with, we can compare how many people are tweeting about Bitcoin against how many people are buying or selling. While we don't see any immediate correlation, the volume of tweets is not the only amount that we can compare, as each tweet can be liked, commented on, and retweeted by users who engage with the content. Each box represents a tweet, with the size varying depending on the features we are comparing. Maybe considering every tweet isn't such a great idea. The user is invited to set filter values for the minimum number of followers, likes, and retweets. This can remove tweets that a large amount of Twitter either did not see or did not interact with. As an extreme filter, the users can choose to filter based on verified status, an accolade given to high-profile Twitter users. It's not just about who is tweeting, but it's also about what they're saying. Sentiment analysis is the process of deducting if a tweet is positive or negative in nature. This visualization quickly shows us, through size and color, who is tweeting to a large audience and if they have anything positive to say. An hour isn't very long to spot influence, so as we move forward, we zoom out to look at 5 days worth of tweets. The information is now grouped together and averages taken, with the full range of results always available. Users can filter further and see how the graph is affected, looking to identify patterns. Weighted sentiment analysis is used to allow Twitter users with a high number of followers, likes, or retweets to contribute to the average sentiment score more. Don't worry, the math is all explained on the page. Finally, we take into consideration that influence may not happen immediately and adjust our results and our visualizations to compensate for this. Users can see how often sentiment and direction of Bitcoin value matches, gaining a clear picture of if the tweets and weighted models they have selected are an indication of Twitter having influence over Bitcoin's value. So, is there a right answer? If it were that simple, I'd be sat on a beach with my Bitcoin millions. But with external influences such as the stock market and so many different combinations of filters and weightings, it's down to the user to explore in the hopes that they strike gold.
When it comes to voting, we make decisions on more than just facts. Emotion, bias, and unconscious thought play an important role in one's decision-making process. But how does advertising influence voters? In order to address this, my thesis, Your Brain on Political Media, visualizes American voters' unconscious response to political advertising and media. The thesis has been created in partnership with BrainSights, a neuromarketing consultancy based in Toronto, Canada. BrainSights collected qualitative survey data and quantitative brain data using EEG technology during research studies in New York and Tennessee in early February. There was a total of 166 research participants across the two cities. This project visualizes second-by-second brain data of political advertisements and news clips. Key issues and tone of voice were analyzed to understand what engages voters unconsciously. The main metric for this analysis is called neural engagement. This is a composite measure of beta, gamma, and theta waves collected from the EEG. These waves are associated with audience attention, emotional resonance, and encoding to memory. Thus, neural engagement presents a high-level read on the persuasiveness of content. Looking at the data, the following bar chart is reflective of the consciously stated survey data. Results highlight 5 key issues of importance: healthcare, climate change, the economy, education, and immigration. People unconsciously engage with similar issues. This overlap is striking, as similarities are not always the case when comparing these different data sets. Let's look at the economy. On aggregate, this issue is 8% greater than benchmark. But in Trump's official example, marketers focus on Trump's achievements through the lens of the economy. For instance, at 16 seconds, there's a superimposed text featuring the low employment rate, and the visual imagery is of a crowd of workers cheering. This is a strong example of the creative tactic audio-visual linkage, and unconsciously, seeing people cheer signals success. Tone of voice is another tool used to shape public opinion in political content. In this Trump example, an inspirational tone was utilized. Our analysis found this is an effective strategy. However, data indicated that a fearful tone is even more engaging. Bloomberg utilizes a fearful tone by highlighting Trump's erratic and irrational behavior. This tone highlights strong engagement in the data, and the creative tactic of audio-visual linkage again underpins the success of the advertisement. Now that we've looked at 2 examples, you as the user can explore the data associated with each advertisement in the study. This neurodata gives us a window into these unconscious processes, which highlight how political advertising has a demonstrable influence on the American voter. Understanding that people are unconsciously influenced, will you look at political advertising differently this upcoming election season? Thank you.
Today, let's take a walk through a swamp, specifically the Great Swamp in New Jersey, to show how we have vilified swamps and contrast that with what we all know that swamps can do as important ecosystems. Let's explore how the Great Swamp was formed 15,000 years ago. As the giant Wisconsin glacier began to melt at the end of the Ice Age, a 30-mile-long lake was left behind and is now the 800-acre Great Swamp as it is today, located just 26 miles west of New York City. Now, let's take a look at the ecological value of the Great Swamp's various habitats and its wildlife. It's home to a variety of ecosystems, but consists of wetland forests and meadows that work together to create a pristine and highly functioning environment which protects the wildlife and filters and absorbs excess water that creates a natural flood protection. This map shows the swamp and its proximity among the density of the suburban sprawl of the towns surrounding it. You can see that 14% is meadows, 16% is wetlands, and 69% is forested areas. The forested habitat is continually managed along with the meadows to allow more of the wetlands to remain healthy and do its job of acting as a giant sponge. The pop-up also shows you the type of wildlife that live in those habitats. Now, as we jump 15,000 years to the 20th century, let's look at how the swamps have culturally and thematically been embedded in our culture as evil through film and music, particularly from the 1940s to the 1970s, before we knew the swamps as wetlands. Clicking on a film or a film clip will take you to the IMDb site where you can find out more information about that film. My favorite is the 1954 film classic, Creature from the Black Lagoon. You can also listen to a few tunes that I chose to set the mood of the bayou or swamp. Above, the timeline shows the story of how in 1959, with the dawn of the jet age, the New York Port Authority had planned to pave over the Great Swamp and build a jet port. This meant more people and more commerce. What then ensued was a vicious 8-year battle to oppose it, and the effort to build the jet port was defeated in 1964. This culminated with the Great Swamp being designated as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's first protected area in the U.S. in 1968, eventually leading to the Federal Clean Air Act passing in 1970 and the Federal Clean Water Act passing in 1972. And last, I would like to show you how important the hydrology of the Great Swamp is. Why is this important? The higher the water discharge amount shows just how hard the Great Swamp works to keep the discharge to a manageable level in order to mitigate the effects of flooding. When heavy rains, especially in the spring months or extreme weather events, such as in the fall, the water discharge levels increase. This shows how important the swamp is to the surrounding areas and also shows the greater patterns with rising global temperatures, sea levels, and extreme weather patterns. As I took a deep dive into the Great Swamp and swamps in general, the more I began to understand how significant, particularly the delicate balance of our most fragile ecosystems are to the health of our planet, not to be demonized, but cherished and celebrated. Thank you.
My thesis was always going to be about emoji. Originally, I planned to do a sentiment analysis using Twitter as a source of data. It was meant to visualize our collective response to difficult times. I wanted to tell a global story, and then I got sick. I exhibited symptoms of the coronavirus from April 2nd to April 25th, and everything. All my plans went out the window. As it turns out, the difficult times were just getting started, and my thesis ended up being about me, my experience during those 3.5 weeks. It's a personal data project, and as it turns out, also a global story. I began logging my symptoms and rating them using emoji to visualize their severity. The emoji represented a blend of my physical and emotional state. The loss of taste and smell, for example, was binary. It wasn't something I could rate on a numeric scale. I had it, then I lost it. So the emoji for taste and smell represent how the symptoms made me feel more than their severity, which is the beauty of emoji. Their meanings are influenced by the words they inflect, but also change based on their proximity to other emoji. Their limitation is their strength, and their ambiguity invites reflection. Then I began cataloging other events of significance and appreciated the clarity of numbers. In contrast to emoji, I found their meaning to be refreshingly transparent. There was comfort and some surprise in these numbers. Did I really only get 9 phone calls in 24 days and almost 2,000 emails? These became a commentary on my condition and my life in general. You can take classes in writing and understanding emoji. They're being used to confound censorship, and they're developing meanings that are personal, community-driven, and cultural. An eggplant is no longer an eggplant. And we live in an age in which the value of science is under assault, and gut reactions are the basis of policy. In that world, emoji are the perfect representation of meaning. They provide a clear point of reaction, but their intellectual investment is low. They play to the emotions and their meaning is personal. They're like these little sugar-coated street signs that you can choose to follow, ignore, or interpret as you please. Here I organized everything I did into rows and columns with emoji representing what I did and how I felt about the activities. I was advised not to lay down, to exercise, not to exercise, to eat, but not to spend the energy cooking, to see a doctor, but none were available, to take action, but above all else, don't do anything. It was an endless list of well-intended contradictions. And my compromise, as you can see, was playing guitar. Finally, I wanted a place to capture how I felt. While emoji were evocative, playful, and adequate for creating interpretable space, I had more to say beyond images and numbers. This journal tracks my personal thoughts and reflections, and it's perhaps the clearest record of both my anxiety and my hopes. Emoji are direct, reactionary, and open to interpretation. They're an invitation, and their depth is in the willingness of the reader to reflect and engage. I began this project hoping to represent our collective emotions and allow individuals to find themselves in that data. Because of events beyond my control, I ended up flipping that model to share an individual perspective and inviting others to find some part of themselves in that story.
From those very personal perspectives and stories, we'll now move on to taste, flavor, and perception with our last topic of tonight, food and culture.
Yeah, food and culture. Cool. So John is going to kick things off, visualizing flavor perception in modern blueberry breeding.
Caitlyn maps British indie and alternative touring histories and career arcs.
Dan traces the globalization of Japanese language and concepts.
And Xingwei wraps it up with a look at how cocoa production is driving deforestation in the Ivory Coast. John, you're up.
Hey, everybody. Question for you. Can you remember the last time you had a bite of food or sip of a drink that just hit the spot? Maybe it brought back a certain memory or made you feel a specific emotion? Well, you can thank your human sensory system for this. Our sensory system is so powerful that it's increasingly being used as a tool to generate detailed consumer feedback. And today we'll see how blueberry growers use this tool to create the highest quality berries. Before we eat food, we usually give it a quick look. While early humans inspected food to see if it was poisonous or nutritious, today we can understand more nuanced qualities like, is this banana ripe? Or even, wow, the skin on this blueberry looks perfect. We create an expectation in these moments, which plays a part in how we perceive flavor. Then the food's in our mouths and flavor perception accelerates. Our tongues with our taste buds and taste receptor cells pass information to the brain, giving us an even fuller image of flavor. And as we chew and swallow our food, odors from our mouth travel to nerve endings in our nasal cavity, where we can sense and layer hundreds of different flavors. So why do blueberry growers care about this? Imagine 100 people tasting 9 different varieties of blueberries, answering specific questions for each, like, is there a floral taste to this berry? How is the color? Too dark? Just right? I think you can imagine how this would be useful for blueberry growers, especially with the amazing technologies available to implement this consumer data. After analyzing flavor surveys, plant geneticists take a closer look at top-performing blueberries, searching for desirable traits. Seedlings are genetically scanned to see if they possess genes likely to provide a certain characteristic, sometimes even a specific flavor like apple or grape. Once the best varieties are chosen, they're either planted or go through further development and cross-pollination. This breeding process takes the male and female plants of different blueberries and produces children, hopefully containing the best qualities of the parents. Now we'll explore the sensory data from a blueberry survey, first looking at performance by flavor category. We have flavor options on the left expressing different measures of appearance, taste, and texture. And we have 9 blueberry varieties on the bottom. Some are named, performing well over multiple seasons. Others have a code representing a new crossbreed. Let's see who is a top performer for the citrus taste. Okay, cool. What about grassiness? Nice. GR112 performed well in those categories, but let's see what it takes to be a selected blueberry in each season. Here, we're actually looking at a data abstraction of the flavor profiles for each of the surveyed blueberry varieties. Let's investigate some of the more significant tastes like sweetness and tartness in GR112. Okay, it's looking like there's a little bit too low sweetness and high tartness in this variety. So let's see if we can find a berry with higher sweetness by comparing the rankings across the other varieties on the top. Okay, Big Eye's looking like it ranked first in sweetness. So let's check out that profile. Awesome, that's looking great. But as you can see on the left, the texture didn't perform as well. So let's see if we can find a better blueberry comparing to juiciness. Awesome, Kodiak performed well, so we'll inspect that. Great, and great overall distributions. As you can see, overall, actually, Kodiak was the winner. For any blueberry growers in the audience, I encourage you to think about how this comprehensive tool could be used in analyzing and developing blueberry flavor. For everyone else, I invite you to put Kodiak to the side for a moment and start thinking about what variety would be your favorite. Not only in preparation for the future of shopping by blueberry variety, but also because at the end of the day, we each have our own unique paths to flavor perception, and this individuality should also be celebrated.
UK guitar music has had a deep-rooted impact on Western popular music as a whole, especially with its massive live experiences. In a recent interview, a radio host summarized a band called Catfish and the Bottlemen's relationship with live music by saying, "You've gone from playing all those venues, that relentless gigging at the very start, and worked your way up to all the different venues throughout the country, to the point where you've now played every single arena in the UK possible." He essentially translated their career to their touring history, an intriguing measure of success different than traditional metrics. A concert allows fandom to materialize in the physical rather than online world through ticket and merch sales. Yet, executives frequently turn down data-driven metrics in favor of relying on their gut and a gig to sign a new band. Let's test that theory and map Catfish's touring history to their career arc. This dot represents the band. The length of the bar is their career timeline, and each line is a tour date. It's interesting to see how the tour dates form around their album cycles with a long lead up to their debut at the start. But we really can't gauge popularity from this view. Something related to a tour date that does translate to popularity is venue size. We'll transition the lines into circles. The smaller circles represent a smaller capacity venue, at most 800 people, while the largest is a large venue with at least a 5,000 person cap. Now we can observe their touring history as well as understand their career arc, which is a steady rise of success. There are more patterns we can observe. Here are some more artists. Again, tour date timelines don't give us much data beyond career length, but when we transition to circles, individuals' patterns emerge. Blossoms are considered the big indie breakout after Catfish and follow a similar pattern as their predecessors. They started in small venues, went into medium-sized venues, and now play large venues consistently. We classified them as the steady risers. In contrast, Arctic Monkeys, arguably the genre-defining band of the past decade and a half, exploded into large venues and have maintained their popularity. They're classified as a big player. Sam Fender has climbed a steep but steady ladder of success. His career is classified as getting there. With still time to grow in his popularity, he's now playing medium-sized venues consistently. Alfie Templeman is classified as new to the scene. While not having a ton of tour dates yet, he's occasionally played large venues by opening for established indie acts such as Sundara Karma and Sports Team. With these categories in mind, we can explore a data set of British indie and alternative musicians. Here are some more steady risers, such as the 1975, maybe the biggest band in the UK right now. The Kooks and the Wombats are both big players that emerged with huge debut records about a decade ago and have maintained large venues long into their career. These artists are classified as consistent because they've steadily played medium-sized venues throughout their healthy career, such as Def Havana, Circle Waves, and Twin Atlantic. Youngblood is one of the most talked about new artists of 2020, and his successful venue size increase in a relatively short period of time is indicative of the sentiment. He still shows a ton of potential to grow, like other artists classified as getting there. Lauren Hibbard has been touring in small venues for being such a new artist, and the exposure coupled with her increased BBC radio play may push her to be classified as getting there soon. Now that we've established the system, I'll end with a quote from a business intelligence analyst at a talent agency. I think data in the music industry needs a bit of a rebrand. For everyone who says, screw the data, I just want to listen to my gut, I think that's amazing and they should keep doing that. Because their gut is a combination of hundreds of internalized pieces of data built up over years of experience that allowed them to own their expertise. Their gut is their experience talking.
When was the last time you had sushi? Have you played Pokemon Go? Do you watch anime? Do you remember your first encounter with Japanese culture? Japan and Asia occupy a growing part of our lives, whether we realize it or not. As we enter what many call the Asian century, Turning Japanese uses language data to investigate the globalization of Japanese culture. Let's take a look. One of the first Japanese words to appear in English was shogun in 1615. That was around the time of the pioneering interactions between Japanese and Westerners. Looking at Japanese loanwords in the Oxford English Dictionary, we can trace the story of Japan's globalization right up to karaoke, or as Americans call it, karaoke. The words size and position tell us their frequency in English. Color tells us their category. Japanese loanwords in the dictionary show what Westerners like about Japan. Food, martial arts, and arts and crafts are the top three. Japan was isolated for centuries and never colonized, but Japanese words provide the second largest number of Asian words to the dictionary. Looking at when Japanese loanwords were added to the Oxford English Dictionary, we see waves of Japanophilia reflected. Floods of words came after Westerners first visited and after Japanese wowed crowds who saw its arts at the Philly and Paris expos of the late 1800s. Searching the New York Times, we get a sense of how Japanese concepts are used at present. Columnist Maureen Dowd uses the word geisha, but not in a story about Japan. It's about Jackie Kennedy. With Google search data, we can explore the globalization of Japanese words and ideas in near real time. Let's see how the Japanese fad for costume dress-up, cosplay spread across the world. Southeast Asia and Mexico were early adopters. By 2013, cosplay is huge in Australia, Europe, and the Americas. Let's see how the Japanese alphabet's traditional kanji characters hold up against cute upstart emojis. In 2006, kanji searches rule the world. But in 2012, we see the color blue emerge as emojis catch on in China and Saudi Arabia. By 2014, emoji searches dominate a blue planet. Only in Japan do kanjis still lead. With Google's data, we can plug in Japanese words and animate them to see when and where Japanese culture sparks our interest. Japan led the way in impacting the West, but as Asian economies grow and Asian immigrants arrive in the US, Asian cultures form a growing part of the Western conversation. Turning Japanese provides a tool for understanding our changing world.
Hey, when was the last time you ate a piece of chocolate? Months ago, days ago, or seconds ago? Miles away from the market where the majority of chocolates consumed, here lies the denuded landscape of Côte d'Ivoire, also known as Ivory Coast. Many of its protected forests have been cleared to make way for cocoa farms. My thesis is to study how cocoa industry is driving deforestation in the Ivory Coast and what's the actual price we paid for each pound of chocolate. Back to 1981, world production of cocoa beans was 1,700,000 tons. Over the past 38 years, this number has tripled with a constantly growing tendency. In 2019, 74% of the world's cocoa was supplied by 4 West African countries. Among them, Ivory Coast occupies 60% of the total. On the other side of the boat, 4 European countries consume the most amount of chocolate. Among them, Switzerland's average chocolate consumption is 8.8 kilograms per capita. But in the end, this number is very foreign to us. What does 8.8 actually mean? Well, theoretically speaking, a healthy cocoa tree can produce approximately 1,200 cocoa beans. That sounds like a lot, right? Well, actually, each pound of chocolate requires 500 beans as raw materials. Therefore, in summary, one cocoa tree can only produce roughly 2 pounds of chocolate per year. Now we know the equation between beans and chocolate is a 1-to-1, so 8.8 kilogram chocolate actually requires 9 trees in your production. In the light of knowing each tree has limited yield quantity and its producing rate declines as growing old, most cocoa farmers chose to adopt new crops while previous production center collapsed. This has introduced one type of deforestation. The last piece of chocolate you ate probably was grown up in the Ivory Coast, where cocoa accounts for 40% of their total exports and up to 90% of the farmers rely on cocoa for their primary income. The introduction of cocoa farming brought many economic opportunities to this land, also marking the start of deforestation. We can see from the graph that towards 2014, the tree cover loss spots are highly overlapped with cocoa producing region. From 2001 to 2018, the forest cover loss is increasing year by year at each canopy cover level. Additionally, a research paper published by the Ohio State University has revealed that there is a significant correlation between cocoa farming and the absence of primate species inside Ivory Coast. Of the 23 forest reserves they investigated, 16 of them have exceeded degradation quotients. Approximately 74% of the surveyed area have already been transformed into cocoa farms. So as a chocolate lover or as a consumer, what can we do about it? Well, besides supporting the companies which have already taken actions to slow down the wave of deforestation, as consumers, the least effort we can contribute is to not waste any chocolate. We can achieve this through saying no to Chocolate Best Challenge, through storing chocolate better, and through paying attention to the cocoa source of your favorite chocolate brand. To conclude, the implication of this project isn't trying to start an anti-chocolate movement, but to address the importance of building a sustainable cocoa supply chain. Guilty or not guilty? That is a question we all have to answer with our own actions.
Wow. I feel like I have to step away and go have some chocolate. I think that concludes, right? Yep, cool. Wow, what a show we just witnessed. And as I mentioned, I think I have to stop and go have some chocolate sustainably now that I know how the whole industry works. But we want to thank everyone for joining us tonight and being a part of this amazing data visualization community. And a really, really special thank you to Daniel Sauter for organizing this event and mentoring these students. We really hope you enjoyed the range of exciting and meaningful visualizations that were shared. And please do repost these presentations, share the links. You can go click through everything and check out the work.
Exactly. So if you're wondering where, you just go to the short link parsons.nyc. So this concludes the 2020 DataVis keynote presentations. Congratulations, class of 2020. High fives, everyone.
High five, Daniel. Great presentation, everyone. Thank you so much.
Woo! You all have a good night. Thank you.
Bye.